Chapter 1. At night, my daughter asked me why Mommy was hiding in the wardrobe. I stroked her hair and told her she was mistaken. But actually, I saw it too. The woman currently taking a shower in the bathroom might not be my wife. Before, my wife would put our daughter to bed every night, but in recent days, she hasn't stepped into our daughter's room once. Tonight, I was responsible for putting our daughter to bed, and she whispered to me, "Daddy, there's another mommy in the wardrobe." My hair stood on end, but I forced myself to stay calm, stroking her head. You be good. You're mistaken. There are only clothes in the wardrobe, no mommy. Go to sleep now. She wanted to say something more, but ultimately didn't. In fact, Yu wasn't wrong. When my wife married me, her family gave us an old wardrobe as part of her dowry, which only my wife used. Yesterday, remembering my tie was inside, I opened the wardrobe door while she wasn't home. My wife, Yuan Yuan, was lying quietly inside. Just as I was about to pull her out, I heard the door. I quickly closed the wardrobe door, pretending nothing had happened. The moon has dimmed now, and my daughter is asleep. I decided to check the wardrobe again while she's still showering. Under the dim light, Yuan Yuan lay there motionless, her body without breath or warmth, her face pale and bloodless. The hair dryer started outside. My heart jumped violently, and I quickly closed the wardrobe door. In my last glimpse, I saw a red mark around Yuan Yuan's neck. Had my wife been strangled to death? I sat on the bed powerlessly, unable to accept this reality. The hairdryer stopped, and I randomly picked up a book to hold in front of me. That old wardrobe stood in the corner of our room, emanating an eerie atmosphere. Still reading? She came to my side wrapped in a towel, drying her damp hair. I nodded and closed the book, placing it on the desk. "Well, you bought it for me, so I should finish it even if it means staying up late." She smiled without saying more, changed into her pajamas, and lay down. My heart was churning because this book wasn't bought by her at all. "Zhangku, aren't you going to shower?" I swallowed hard, took a deep breath, and tried to stay calm. "No rush, I'll go soon." I looked at her deeply and asked while undressing. "My classmate Han, Nan invited us to dinner tomorrow. Want to go?" She looked up and smiled. "I'll pass. You two catch up, just don't come back too late." I nearly stumbled leaving the room because Han wasn't my classmate at all, but hers. If forgetting about the book was possible, how could she not know Han Nan, her own best friend? I confirmed one fact. The person lying in bed wasn't my wife at all. Chapter 2. I wanted to call the police, but if she found out, while I wouldn't care, my daughter might be in mortal danger. Besides, in my panic, I'd left my phone and clothes in the bedroom. Damn it! I slammed my fist against the wall. The sharp pain cleared my head, pulling me out of my panic. First, I had to calm this woman down, then wait for an opportunity. Everything had to wait until daylight. I showered early and returned to the bedroom. The main light was off. Only the bedside lamp was on. For some reason, this made me extremely drowsy. My eyelids felt heavy, like stones weighing them down. "Go to sleep. You have to get up early tomorrow." Her gentle words seemed to have a magical power, compelling me to obey. Later that night, my throat was parched. I wanted to get up for some water. Subconsciously, I reached out for my wife. At that moment, I suddenly remembered something and quickly retracted my hand. Luckily, I didn't touch anything. Wait, nothing? She wasn't there? My daughter. I switched on the main light. The room bathed in a harsh white glow. My daughter Yuyu's bedroom door was wide open, the room empty. My strength drained away. I crouched on the floor, eyes vacant. I rushed back to my own room and opened the wardrobe. Yuan Yuan was gone too. I dressed, grabbed my phone. It was 3:00 a.m. Suddenly, I remembered something. Yu always wore a children's smartwatch, even while sleeping. I opened the tracking app. The map showed my daughter was at Spring Pond Park. Spring Pond Park? There was a 3-square-kilometer artificial lake there. Don't tell me she's planning to murder and dispose of the body. Ignoring everything else, I immediately dialed 110. "Hello, I want to report a crime. Spring Pond Park, someone's murdered and disposed of a body." There was silence on the other end. Then the operator's voice. What's the exact location? I checked my daughter's location again. At the south gate of Spring Pond Park. Before I could finish, something clamped around my throat, choking me, preventing me from breathing, from speaking. A pale hand snatched my phone. Sorry, officer, my husband is drunk. He's not in his right mind. She hung up. You're still awake? I gasped for air, ready to fight her when my daughter, yawning, walked out of the bathroom. Mom, Dad, what are you doing? Chapter 3. I went over and held my daughter in my arms. After making sure she was unharmed, I comforted her, saying, Daddy has something to do with the company. I have to work overtime tonight. Be good, Yo-Yo, and go to sleep. Seeing my daughter return to her room, I stared at the woman's eyes, then relaxed my expression. She was still in her pajamas. Yawning, she went back to her room as if nothing had happened. I quickly left the house and went straight to the garage. I only breathed a sigh of relief the moment I drove out of the complex. My body was drenched in cold sweat. I really didn't dare to think back on what had happened today. I parked the car near the night market and, using the noise and lights of the crowd as cover, slowly fell asleep in the car seat. In my dream, I saw my wife again, curled up inside the old wooden cabinet. She seemed to have something to say, but something around her neck prevented her from speaking. I wanted to tenderly caress her cheek, but as soon as I placed my hand on it, a piercingly cold sensation caused me excruciating pain. Her facial features, like peeling wall paint, slowly fell to the ground, leaving behind only a ghastly white layer of skin. I don't know how long had passed when the vibration of my phone woke me from the nightmare. It was an unknown number. Hello, this is the police from XX. We have some matters to verify with you. Please come to the XX police station. I instantly snapped out of my daze and hurried to drive to the local police station. Chapter 4. Was the 3:05 a.m. call last night from you? Yes, it was. Why didn't you call again? I hesitated, unsure how to answer, wanting only to make up an excuse and get it over with. Officer, I had been drinking last night. I wasn't sure if I was dreaming. I found my daughter wasn't home and made the call in a daze. I'm so sorry to have wasted your time. I'm really sorry. The two officers had strange expressions, clearly saying, I don't believe you. This morning, we received a call. A female body was discovered in Chunchi Park. The coroner determined the deceased to be 32 years old. The image of my wife flashed through my mind, and tears streamed down my face. I had a feeling. I couldn't help sighing. Officer, could I identify the body? Maybe I know her. They agreed to my request, and I followed them to the morgue. It was quiet inside. Under each white sheet lay a case. Mr. Zhang, please prepare yourself. The deceased is strange. The officer gestured towards the body. Strange? My heart pounded with fear. I placed my hand on the white sheet and tremblingly uncovered it from the head down. A foul smell assaulted my nostrils, making my stomach churn. But what terrified me more was that this naked corpse had no facial features. A blank sheet of pale skin seemed pasted over her face, reminding me of last night's dream. Everything that happened in the dream had become reality. How could this be? I looked at the officers questioningly. They indicated this was the first time they had encountered such a situation. Moreover, they couldn't confirm the deceased's identity yet. There were no missing person reports filed in the area. But I knew. The person lying there was my wife. The red ligature mark on her neck was identical to the one I'd seen on the clothes in our closet. Leaving the police station, I walked down the street like a zombie. I had lied to the police. I told them I didn't know her. I said my wife and daughter were home, and that last night's call was just a drunken nightmare, just nonsense. Chapter 5. Back in the car, I was completely lost. Either last night's phone app location, or I must have been wrong. Or maybe neither of us was wrong, but she was. I endured this until 8:30 a.m. when a WeChat message popped up on my phone. Honey, you went to Minmin's house to play. I'm going to work overtime. When are you coming back? I suddenly realized it was Saturday, and school was out. Hello, is this Minmin's dad? This is Yuyu's dad. Is Yuyu at your place? After receiving confirmation from Minmin's dad, my tense nerves finally began to relax. Now, I had to separate Yu from her as soon as possible and get her back after I figured everything out. What I kept finding suspicious was the old wardrobe at home. I had to go back and investigate. Back home, I checked all the rooms first and, after confirming no one was there, double-locked the main door. I put on disposable gloves and cautiously opened the wardrobe door. I had been hasty last time and hadn't observed carefully. The wardrobe was divided into upper and lower sections with 3 drawers in the middle. Some old cotton-padded jackets and clothes were placed on top, and my wife's seasonal dresses hung below. The wife I saw was lying among those dresses. Now, some underwear and my daughter's old belongings were placed there. Nothing seemed unusual, which meant the strangeness might be hidden inside those 3 dark drawers. I slowly pulled open the leftmost drawer. There were some shoe insoles and a rag doll my wife used to play with. I took it out, examining it closely, but found nothing strange. Just as I was about to put it back, the doll slipped from my hand and fell to the floor. In a daze, I seemed to hear a little girl's laughter, sharp and piercing, unsettling me. Panicked, I quickly threw it back into the drawer. Closing the wardrobe door, I wiped the cold sweat from my forehead and gasped for air. The more I looked at this wardrobe, the creepier it seemed. My phone vibrated. A message jolted my nerves again. "I like you so much. It's a pity we have to say goodbye now." The sender was my wife. Chapter 6. I asked her who she was and what she wanted, but received no reply. What does goodbye really mean? Will I never see you again? Or, my hands trembling, I called Minmin's dad again. "Oh? Yo-Yo's dad. Didn't you just pick up Yo-Yo?" My phone dropped to the floor with a clatter. I thought, this is bad. I closed the wardrobe and immediately went to Minmin's house. Minmin's dad was surprised to see me. His first words were, "Didn't you take your daughter back to her grandmother's house?" I didn't know how to answer, just gave a dry laugh. Through his home surveillance, I saw myself smiling as I led Yo-Yo away. Everything was so absurd. What was going on in this world? The strange nightmare, the faceless female corpse, the person who looked exactly like me, and that creepy wardrobe and doll. Right, Minmin's dad mentioned her grandmother's house. Could it be that everything was connected to that place? Besides, that old wardrobe also came from there. I had to go and investigate. Yuan Yuan's hometown was a small mountain village. I had only been there twice. Her mother died young, leaving only her father. The last time I went was 6 years ago. I only remembered that the village wasn't big, with a few hundred households, a river in front, and mountains behind. The villagers were very welcoming. If the problem really lay there, I would find out as soon as I asked. Chapter 7. Lushan Village. That was the name of the little mountain village. It was already evening when I arrived, and the whole world was quiet, unusually quiet. After driving continuously for 10 hours, I was really tired. There was a guest house next to the village, and I decided to rest for a while. Besides, maybe the other me was also here. While checking in, I noticed something unusual. Half of the chairs in the guest house were placed backwards, as if they were specifically for people outside. Looking at the pitch-black entrance of the guest house, I couldn't help but feel a chill down my spine. Lying in bed, I was thinking about my daughter and couldn't fall asleep. After a long time, I vaguely heard a sound. There was no wind outside and no one inside. I wanted to get up, but found I couldn't. Sleep paralysis? But this has already been scientifically explained, so I wasn't very scared. It should be fine after a while. The moon outside was very bright, illuminating the room. The sound appeared again, and I was certain it was the sound of footsteps. The door creaked open, and my heart stopped. In the moonlight, I saw the person's face. It was him. Chapter 8. It was Yu's grandfather. Why was he here? I wanted him to help me up, but instinctively, my body began to tremble, like an animal facing its natural predator. He walked very slowly, each step rigid and stiff, holding something in his hand that I couldn't make out clearly. In the silent air, a voice as thin as silk suddenly appeared in my ears. "Run away, don't. Run away, don't." My breathing suddenly became rapid. As he got closer, I could finally see what he was holding, a doll identical to the one I had seen before. I desperately tried to sit up, and finally, just as he reached my bedside, I jolted awake with a start. Come to think of it, Yuan Yuan's mother passed away early, and her father died 6 years ago. How could I dream of him? I rubbed my temples. At this moment, I was sitting on the couch at home watching TV, my daughter playing with toys nearby, with bright sunshine outside. So it was just a dream. I sighed in relief, lying sideways on the couch, and happily asked my daughter, what are you playing with? Yu showed an innocent smile and pulled something out from behind her, making me break out in a cold sweat. It was that doll again. I grabbed it, wanted to throw it away, but the doll seemed to bite onto my hand, impossible to shake off. At this crucial moment, Yuan Yuan ran out from our room, snatched the doll from my hand, and held it against her chest with both hands. You need to leave, get away from here, the further the better. Looking at my wife's pained expression, my heart ached terribly. Just as I was about to rush over to help her, a flash of white light appeared. I struggled to open my eyes. An ray of sunlight shone through. I checked my phone. It was already past 6 in the morning. So, last night was just a dream. Chapter 9. My muscles ached all over, and it took me a long time to get out of bed. Lots of people were shouting and hawking outside. This place had clearly become a tourist area. I kept replaying the previous events in my mind, but couldn't make heads or tails of it. Standing at the village entrance, my legs actually trembled. I remembered what my wife had said to me in my dream, telling me to go as far away as possible. Was she hinting that I shouldn't enter the village? But my daughter had already come here. How could I leave? I leaned against the car and smoked 3 cigarettes in a row. A man wearing a red hat appeared in my field of vision. I vaguely remembered him as the son of my wife's neighbor. We had met once a few years ago. The reason I still remembered him was because he was a dwarf, only 1 meter tall, and stood out in a crowd. Hey, Dajwan, I called out tentatively. He slowly turned around with a puzzled look on his face. I hurried over to him. It's me, Zhang Ku. Remember me? He took the cigarette I offered him, took a few puffs, and asked in our local dialect, "Why are you back? Alone? Yuan Yuan isn't with you." I glanced around and pulled him over to sit in the rest area of the guest house. I've run into some trouble. I told him everything. The expression on his face gradually became serious, but he wasn't surprised. I guess he must know something. He looked out the window, then turned back to me and slowly said, "Yuan Yuan isn't dead." I gasped. What's going on? Dezhuang took a deep breath and told me a bizarre story that I found hard to believe. Chapter 10. Dezhuang was a year older than Yuan Yuan and often took her out to play when they were little. That year, Dezhuang was 6 and Yuan Yuan was 5. They went to Willow Mountain to gather firewood in the morning, but by noon, they couldn't find their way down. And for some reason, it suddenly started to rain heavily. Panicked, they stumbled upon a dilapidated temple. Dezhuang remembered his parents saying, "Never enter a mountain temple, lest you be haunted by little ghosts." But if they didn't go inside, they would surely be drenched to death by the heavy rain. Inside, cobwebs hung thick, dust covered the floor, a mountain god statue sat high above, and small, kneeling figures were arrayed below it. The two huddled together, neither daring to speak, feeling as if something was watching them. Lightning flashed frequently, thunder rumbled, and dirt began to fall from the temple's roof. Dezhuang inadvertently looked back and discovered the clay arm of the mountain god statue was broken. On the ground lay a shattered black earthen jar. Yuan Yuan also turned to look. According to Dezhuang's recollection, her eyes were wide open as she walked towards the black earthen jar. He wasn't sure if it was his imagination or not, but he thought he saw a wisp of black air swirling and flying into Yuan Yuan's body. More specifically, it entered her beloved cloth doll. The situation was so strange that Dezhuang was frozen with fear. Fortunately, the rain stopped. Dezhuang quickly pulled Yuan Yuan down the mountain, leaving the firewood behind. After returning home, Yuan Yuan became seriously ill. Her parents didn't think much of it, treating it as a common cold. Dezhuang, on the other hand, was unaffected, continuing to eat and drink as usual. Finally, 3 years after the incident, Dezhuang regretted entering that mountain temple. Chapter 11. Over 3 years, Dezhuang's height shrunk instead of growing, and no growth supplements worked. Puzzled, he sought help from Old Man Yuan in the village. Old Man Yuan was considered a capable man in the village, handling everything from weddings and funerals to feng shui and exorcisms. According to Dazhuang, the location and furnishings of his guest house had been chosen under Old Man Yuan's guidance. During construction, every time work began, it would rain, accompanied by howling winds that sounded like ghostly wails. After completion, strange occurrences continued. Old Man Yuan said the guest house occupied a space it shouldn't have. Leave some leeway in everything you do. Helping others is helping yourself. So, half the chairs in the guest house lobby faced outwards, and the fourth floor was skipped, going directly from the third to the fifth floor. Only then did things quiet down, and the business prospered. When Old Man Yuan first saw Dazhuang, he declared that Dazhuang had broken a taboo, attracting a mischievous spirit that was draining his vital essence and damaging his life force. If Dazhuang had waited another 6 months, he would likely be dead. Dazhuang immediately knelt, begging for help. That night, Old Man Yuan had him sleep under a willow tree, using willow branches to dispel the yin energy and restore his lifespan. Dazhuang intended to feign sleep to see what would happen, but as soon as he lay down, he lost consciousness. The next day, he felt much lighter, but Old Man Yuan looked grim. "Did you go somewhere you shouldn't have?" Dazhuang shook his head. "Young man, don't lie to me. The trouble you've caused is significant, and even I can't guarantee a solution. Tell me the truth, so I can save your life, otherwise." Frightened by Old Man Yuan's words, Dazhuang confessed the details of an incident from 3 years prior. After listening, Old Man Yuan sighed and waved Dazhuang away. As he left, Old Man Yuan told him to return if anything else happened. Chapter 12. So, we should go find Old Man Yuan. He passed away 4 years ago. His son handles some funerals and weddings now. Not sure if he can help. Seeing my urgency, Dazhuang led me into the village, heading straight for Old Man Yuan's house. "How do you know Yuan Yuan isn't dead?" After some hesitation, I finally asked the question. "When Yuan Yuan got married, Old Man Yuan said she was destined to live to 80. Was Old Man Yuan here when we got married?" Dazhuang nodded. Hearing this, I felt a lot better. A 3-story building in the center of the village. This was Old Man Yuan's house. After a few knocks, a man in his 30s emerged, squinting at us. "Come in." Before Old Man Yuan passed away, he told me to take care of this troublesome matter for you if you ever came. Dazhuang and I followed him into the courtyard. Rows of wooden racks held unknown herbs drying in the sun. A faint medicinal fragrance filled the air, relaxing my weary body. "You're Zhang Ke, right? Come with me." Dazhuang whispered that his name was Yuan Yuan. I quickened my pace and followed him inside. "Hey, you don't need to come in." Yuan Yuan stopped Dazhuang at the door with his hand, indicating that I should follow him alone. "When did Yuan Yuan start acting strange?" I thought carefully for a moment. "About 2 weeks ago." "Any unusual behavior?" I recounted everything to him again. After listening, Yuan Yuan frowned. "The faceless female corpse you mentioned, and the other you that you saw, they should both be dolls. Yuan Yuan and your daughter should be fine." Hearing this, I felt much relieved. "Tonight, you'll come with me up the mountain." Yuan Yuan finished speaking and, seemingly out of nowhere, produced a red lucky bag and placed it in my hand. "Can we go during the day?" Yuan Yuan shook his head. "It must be at midnight. Not a minute before, not a minute after." Chapter 13. Night fell, and the stars and moon appeared together. We walked on a dark path, just Yuan Yuan and me. The mountain path was winding, and I simply followed Yuan Yuan upwards, but my heart was pounding. I realized that without him, I probably wouldn't be able to find my way back down. "Zhang Ke, no matter what you encounter later, don't be afraid. If you see Yuan Yuan, run over and grab her immediately. Remember, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of anything. Remember, an upright person is not afraid of their shadow, and righteousness wards off evil spirits." I nodded, then looked up and saw something dark plunge towards my face, which startled me and made me flail about for a while. "It's a bat, don't be scared." I was breathing heavily, unable to speak, And even though my feet were on solid ground, it felt soft and yielding. After walking for a while, I took out my phone. The time was 23:55. By the moonlight, I could vaguely make out a small hut in the distance, and I remembered what De Zhuang had told me. Is that the mountain god temple? Yuan Wen shushed me and nodded. I tried to keep my breathing even, and I discreetly wiped the sweat from my palms onto my clothes. 23:59. The forest was silent. Not even a bird chirped. I felt Yuan Wen put his hand on my leg and instinctively looked down. A cloth doll was clinging there, its sharp teeth tearing at my flesh, and a shrill laughter came from its mouth. I just about reached out to fling it away when a red light suddenly flashed from my pocket. I was still crouched on the ground, Yuan Wen's hand supporting me. It had just been a hallucination. Now, the time on my phone displayed 00. Chapter 14. The moon in the sky suddenly brightened, illuminating the entire forest with a clarity that rivaled the sun. A sharp laugh echoed from all directions. Sweat dripped steadily from my hands, but Yuan Wen still signaled me to stay still. I clearly saw a familiar figure emerge from the temple. Chapter 15. After several hundred years, I can finally see the light of day again. I didn't expect you actually gave birth to a daughter on the double ninth festival during the hour and minute of Ean. The person who walked out of the temple was unexpectedly Yu. She was still wearing the same clothes as when she left, her height and appearance unchanged. Only her voice had become cold, sinister, sharp, and piercing. As expected, Yuan Wen's eyes lit up. He took out a few willow leaves from his pocket, flicked his fingers, and sent them flying straight towards Yu. However, the leaves didn't land on Yu. A tall woman blocked her. Yuan Yuan, I exclaimed, rushing forward. But somehow, even though the distance was only a dozen meters, it felt like the ends of the earth, and I couldn't reach her. Oh, so it's you? My father. Yu's expression suddenly turned sinister, a pale smile playing on her lips, as countless cloth dolls lunged at me, giggling. I clearly saw tears on Yuan Yuan's face. She was actually still alive. Then what had I seen before? Without time to think, I reached out to block them. Yuan Wen walked in front of me, his fingers pinching a blue flame. He opened his hand and scattered it, and the entire forest around us suddenly ignited. We'll be burned to death too, I hurriedly warned, but although the forest was burning, it remained unharmed. We share the same bloodline. Why must you force my hand? According to seniority, what should I call you? A mocking expression appeared on Yuan Wen's face. Yu hid behind Yuan Yuan, her back against the temple door. Boy, don't push it too far. Even your father wouldn't dare do anything to me, let alone you. It turned out that old man Yuan had visited Yuan Yuan years ago, but for some unknown reason, he hadn't resolved the situation. Yuan Wen had asked his father about it, only receiving one answer. The time wasn't right. This was the reason for today's calamity. However, Yuan Wen finally understood what his father meant by the time. Chapter 16. Hundreds of years ago, a family surnamed Yuan gave birth to a pair of twins, a boy and a girl. The brother was born with the ability to see ghosts and spirits, possessing the natural aptitude of a sorcerer. The sister was born with exceptional intelligence, able to perceive people's hearts and foresee the future. As adults, their paths diverged. The brother chose to wander the world, while the sister secluded herself in a mountain village, researching the secrets of life and death. Decades later, the sudden deaths of dozens of people in a village caught the brother's attention. But after he investigated, the truth left him in utter agony. The perpetrator of these horrific acts was his own sister. He was now an elderly man in his 60s, while his sister maintained the appearance of a 6 or 7-year-old child. She had achieved longevity by stealing the lives of others. Unable to bring himself to kill her, the brother built a mountain god shrine and sealed her within an earthen jar. He and his clan settled at the foot of the mountain, the place now known as Shaolu Village. Yuan Wen remembered his father saying that the seal would eventually break, and their lineage might one day be severed. Therefore, he must end this in his generation. To kill her, he needed to place a willow leaf on her head at the exact time of her birth. the year of Guimao, July 24th, at 00:43. Now, he had encircled the area with a ring of spiritual fire, waiting for that moment. I watched the flames surge around us, reaching towards the sky, completely at a loss. My wife shook her head frantically, trying to speak, but unable to utter a word. I had asked Yuan Yuan about it, and he told me it was a soul-binding curse. Those afflicted appear dead, but are actually in a deep sleep. The only way to break the curse is to apply human blood to it. I hate my own helplessness, my inability to save my wife and daughter. The time on my phone reads 00:40. Chapter 17. Fear began to appear on Yu Yu's face. She looked around, unease, fear, and sorrow all surfacing at once. I found the restraints on me had vanished, so I gradually approached her. Yuan Wen's face was pale, his eyes conveying his worry to me. I held a willow leaf in my hand. Yes, I was the one who was going to carry out the plan. I heard from Yuan Wen that you are an elder. Can you let this junior go? I raised my hands above my head in a gesture of surrender, stopping about 3 meters in front of her. If I let her go, who will let me go? I'm not wrong, you are. Besides, don't you even know you've been lied to? Lied to? Who lied to me? I had no time to think. Saving my wife and daughter was the most important thing right now. Yes, it's all my fault, but my daughter is innocent. Let them go. Let me take her place. Okay. She still gripped my wife tightly, facing the flames gradually closing in. The fear on her face intensified. 00. Chapter 18. I glanced at my phone, knowing the time was almost up. Countless cloth dolls appeared from nowhere, surrounding the temple and chanting, incredibly annoying. But no matter what, I had to act within this minute for my wife and daughter. Yuan Wen roared, and the surrounding flames transformed into a blue chain, lunging towards Yu Yu. The chanting dolls, like moths to a flame, threw themselves in front of Yu Yu, but it was all in vain. Yet, for some reason, my wife kept shaking her head at me, tears glistening in her eyes. Though suspicion arose in my heart, my hand, as fast as lightning, placed the willow leaf on top of Yu Yu's head. Suddenly, a bright green light erupted. When I woke up again, I was lying in a hospital bed. Chapter 19. When I opened my eyes, Yuan Yuan and Yu Yu were asleep beside me. After all this, the matter had finally come to an end. I only remember that when I placed the willow leaf on Yu Yu's head, everything seemed to freeze, and a jumble of memories flooded my mind. The brother in that story was called Yuan Yuan, and the sister was called Yuan Man. After Yuan Yuan left home to wander the world, Yuan Man came to Lushan Mountain to live in seclusion and devote herself to the study of life and death. One day, a group of uninvited guests arrived on the mountain. Yuan Man recognized them. They were villagers from the foot of the mountain. A plague was spreading through the village, and they begged her to come down and save them. After a month, she exhausted herself saving the villagers. But just as she was about to return to the mountain, several villagers, ungrateful and malicious, wanted to imprison her in the village forever. She would rather die than submit. During the struggle, she fell off a cliff. As she was dying, disheartened, she abandoned the study of life, which she had pursued for most of her life, and turned to the path of ghosts. According to Yuan Man's research, the path of life required quiet cultivation, refining the body and spirit, and striving for immortality over 100 years. The path of ghosts, however, was forbidden territory, because no one had ever seen the soul after death. If people did have souls after death, it meant that death was not the end, but possibly another beginning in a different state. But if people didn't have souls, death would be the end. In the end, she won the gamble, attaching her soul to an object, achieving another kind of immortality. Later, the village was destroyed. Yuan Yuan, her brother, blamed his sister, but couldn't bear to kill her. So he sealed her in a mountain god temple and ordered future generations to guard it carefully. Until Dazhuang and Yuan Yuan broke the seal, and Yuan Man was reborn through the cloth doll. But she was tired of living in an object and wanted to possess a person born at the Yin hour of the Yin day. hoping to re-enter the path of life through the path of ghosts. I sighed helplessly and lay quietly in bed, waiting for the morning sun.